On the pale blue, yellowed architectural drawing of the Blackwood mansion, there are exactly 18 wine storage compartments. I am holding that musty-smelling paper right in front of my face right now. The architects drew it in 1924, and every millimeter of the basement was recorded meticulously. But the problem is, down there are 19 doors. I inherited this 40-acre vineyard in Napa Valley after my grandfather, Arthur, passed away from a sudden heart attack last month. He was a sullen, strict man, obsessed with rules. In the will, he left me the entire estate with a peculiar condition that the lawyer had to read over and over 3 times to make sure he wasn't mistaken. You must go down to the wine cellar to check once a day, but never, absolutely never stay there after 3 a.m. I laughed when I heard that. I thought it was just a sign of senile dementia. I am a city-raised kid, a 6-year-old programmer, and I don't believe in ghosts or family curses. That was my first mistake. Yesterday afternoon, at 1:45 p.m., I made my first trip down to the cellar to take inventory. As soon as I stepped through the thick steel door separating the main house from the cellar stairs, the air changed immediately. The sweltering 32-degree C heat of the California summer vanished, replaced by a bone-chilling, damp, cold air, carrying the pungent smell of rotting oak and sour fermenting grapes. It wasn't just the smell of old wine. It had the metallic taste of iron, like dried blood. The wine cellar corridor stretched endlessly, lit only by dim filament bulbs dangling from the low ceiling. On both sides of the stone walls were thick oak doors, numbered with tarnished brass digits. I started walking and counting out of habit. 1, 2, 3. My footsteps echoed on the cold stone floor, creating clacking sounds that sounded louder than normal. Everything matched the blueprint in my hand. Door number 6 is the 1980 red wine storage. Door number 12 contains empty barrels. 17, 18. I stopped at door number 18. According to the blueprint, this is the end of the corridor. Behind it is just the thick earth and rock of the hillside. But the corridor didn't end there. It extended for about 3 more meters, leading to a dark dead end where the ceiling light bulb had been smashed. And there, looming in the darkness, was door number 19. It wasn't like the other doors. While the other 18 doors were made of warm brown oak, this door was crafted from a type of jet black wood, with strange swirling grain like eyes staring at me. It seemed to absorb the light from the flashlight in my hand instead of reflecting it. And the scariest thing? It had no handle, no keyhole, no hinges exposed. It was just a pitch black, smooth wooden slab, wedged tightly into the stone frame, cold as an iceberg in the wine cellar. I reached out to touch the wooden surface, but my fingertips stopped a few centimeters away. A primal sense of unease rose in my stomach, warning me to back away. I looked down at the map in my hand again. Blank space. Nothing here at all. But as I stood there, in the heavy silence of the underground, I swear I heard a very faint sound coming from the other side of that black wooden door. It wasn't the wind whistling. It was the sound of someone scratching their fingernails on the wood, very slowly. I held my breath, taking 2 steps back. That creaking sound stopped immediately, as if something on the other side knew I had moved away. "It's just rats," I whispered, trying to make my voice sound convincing. But deep down, I knew no rat could make such a slow sound, deliberate sound like that, on a solid piece of wood. I turned to leave, telling myself I'd call a mason tomorrow to tear down this wall, to see what the hell was behind it. But my flashlight beam swept across the brick wall located between door number 18 and the black void leading to door 19. There was a loose brick. It stuck out about half an inch compared to the others. The mortar around it had peeled away. Curiosity conquered fear. I approached door 18, a relatively safe zone, and used a pocket knife to pry that brick out. It slid out suspiciously easily. Inside that dark recess was a worn, cowhide-bound notebook, emitting the characteristic smell of Grandfather Arthur's pipe tobacco. I opened it right there, under the yellow light of the hallway bulb. The first pages, written from 1985, were completely normal. He recorded details about soil pH, October rainfall, and Cabernet grape yield. His handwriting was neat and tidy. But when I flipped quickly to the back, to the entries of 2023, the handwriting changed completely. It became shaky, scrawled, with many places where the pen pressed so hard it tore the paper. The 12th of November, 2023. Heard it again last night. It's not knocking anymore. It's scratching, getting stronger every day. The 3rd of December 2023. I was wrong to think I could seal it with black oak. I should have used reinforced concrete, but now it's too late. It has eaten deep into the foundation. I swallowed, my throat dry. I flipped to the last page, written just 2 days before he died. The lines were written in red ink, large and clear, unlike the ramblings of a senile old man. To whoever reads this, never count the doors out loud. It hates being identified, and if you see door 19 open, even a crack, D.O., not. Look, inside. A cold wind ran down my spine. I had just counted out loud when I came down here. 17, 18. Click. The sound rang out from the end of the corridor. It wasn't scratching anymore. It was the sound of a door latch. I snapped my head up to look towards the darkness where door 19 was hiding. In the absolute silence of the basement, I heard the sound of metal clicking together, as if someone was trying to turn a doorknob. Something I was sure door 19 didn't have. I stood, rooted to the spot. The flashlight in my hand shook violently, dancing wildly on the shiny black ebony surface of door 19. My reason screamed, "It's a flat piece of wood, no handle. You're just imagining it." But my hearing told a different story. Creak, clack. It was the characteristic sound of a rusty iron latch being lifted slowly, then dropped. It was so distinct that I could feel the weight of the metal, even though my eyes saw nothing but the smooth wood grain. Like the sound was coming from another layer of reality, overlapping with mine, but not quite matching visually. Then the silence returned, heavier than before, as if the air in the cellar had been sucked out. About 5 seconds later, the next sound rang out. Thump, 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 footsteps. It was heavy, slow, and came from right behind that door. According to the blueprint, behind door 19 is tons of compacted earth and rock of the Napa Valley hillside. There couldn't be space for a human to stand there, let alone walk. The footsteps moved from left to right along the width of the door. I counted unconsciously, cold sweat pouring down, soaking my shirt back. 18 steps. Stop. The rustling sound of coarse fabric rubbing together, like someone turning in a narrow space. Then 18 footsteps returning in the opposite direction. It was patrolling. Or worse, it was waiting for me to do something next. The foul smell suddenly became pungent. The smell of rotten eggs, mixed with sour fermenting wine, rising from the gap under the door, making my stomach churn. My throat surged with bitter bile. I couldn't stay here another second. I clutched my grandfather's journal to my chest, turned, and ran for dear life towards the stairs. The wine cellar corridor seemed to stretch out unreasonably long. I ran past door 15, 14, 13, but the brass numbers just glided by slowly, as if in a nightmare. And the most terrible thing was that the thumping footsteps didn't get any quieter as I ran further away. It echoed along the water pipes running on the ceiling, chasing right above my head. I dashed up the stairs, slammed the thick steel door separating the cellar from the kitchen, and bolted it. My hands shook so much it took 3 tries to turn the lock latch. I leaned my back against the door, gasping, heart beating against my chest, as if it wanted to burst. The kitchen was flooded with afternoon sunlight. The microwave clock read 2:15 p.m. "You're safe," I reassured myself, trying to regulate my breathing. Just hallucinations from toxic gas in the cellar. But then, I felt a slight vibration transmit through the thick steel layer behind my back. Knock, knock, knock. 3 gentle, polite knocks rang out from the other side of the steel door, right next to my ear. I didn't open the door. I didn't ask who is it. I backed away very slowly until my back touched the kitchen island, eyes still glued to the steel door latch. The silence enveloped the house so heavily I could hear the refrigerator humming in the corner. No more knocking. That night, I slept with the lights blazing and a fruit knife placed on the bedside table. But my fitful sleep was haunted by nightmares about endless corridors and dancing brass numbers. The next morning, under the brilliant California sun, last night's fear seemed silly. Air pressure, I told myself while making coffee. Underground cellar temperature changes make the steel door expand and contract. Perfectly normal, but I still had to go down there. Grandfather's will clearly stated, daily inspection. I couldn't lose the inheritance of this multi-million-dollar estate just because of an old wooden door. This time, I prepared better. I brought a high-powered flashlight, a crowbar just as a precaution, and a glass filled to the brim with water. It was an old trick I learned from movies. Water will detect vibrations that the human ear cannot hear. 10 a.m. I opened the cellar door. The damp cold hit again, but this time I walked decisively. I breezed past the first 18 doors. Not counting, not looking. I went straight to the end of the corridor, where door 19 was waiting in the darkness. It still stood there, silent, harmless. The swirling black wood grain looked like abstract art, rather than demon eyes under my powerful flashlight. No footsteps, no scratching. See? You just scared yourself, I whispered, feeling a bit relieved. I placed the glass of water on the stone floor, about 5 centimeters from the base of door 19. The water surface was flat as a mirror. I squatted down, watching intently, waiting for any movement. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. Nothing. I sighed in relief, reaching out to pick up the glass and leave. Suddenly, the water vibrated. It wasn't a vibration caused by ground shaking. It started from the center of the cup, radiating out in tiny, regular concentric circles. Ripple, ripple, ripple. Its rhythm was very slow, about 12 beats per minute. I held my breath, putting my ear close to the non-existent gap between the door and the floor. And then I heard it. A wet, wheezing sound, tiny but unmistakable. Guh, guh. It was breathing. Something on the other side was lying flat on the floor, pressing its mouth right against the door gap where I was sitting, and it was breathing. Every time it exhaled, a stream of invisible cold air pierced through the solid wood grain, making the water in the glass oscillate. I froze in horror. The distance between my face and that thing was just a wooden board less than 5 centimeters thick. And then, the water in the glass began to change color. From clear, a plume of dark red smoke started swirling up from the bottom, as if someone had just dropped a drop of ink, or a drop of blood into it. But I hadn't touched the glass. I didn't wait to see what would happen next with that glass of water. Survival reflex kicked in. I sprang up, intending to run, but before I could lift my foot, a piercing sound rang out. Smash! The thick glass tumbler wasn't knocked over, nor was it touched by anyone. It exploded from the inside. Shards of shattered glass flew across the floor, embedding themselves in the legs of my jeans. Water splashed onto the floor. But it wasn't water anymore. Under the cold white flashlight beam, the patchy liquid puddle on the gray brick floor was deep crimson, thick and steaming profusely. Immediately, a terrible foul stench assaulted my nose. The smell of rotting meat, spoiled fermenting grapes, and the metallic tang of copper. It was the smell of an abandoned slaughterhouse in the middle of summer. I covered my mouth, trying to suppress the nausea rising to my throat, and backed away, my shoe sole slipping on that sticky liquid. Enough, I moaned, my voice breaking with fear. I turned and ran for my life up the stairs, leaving behind the shards and the pool of blood. I was sure it was blood, right in front of door 19. I spent that whole afternoon researching the history of the house online, but found no records of a secret room or unusual deaths, except for grandfather's death. But I am a software engineer, I think with logic and evidence. If my senses were deceived by toxic gas or hallucinations, machines would not know how to lie. I placed an express order for an industrial borescope camera with a 5-meter cable, with LED lights and 4K recording capability. The next morning, the package arrived. I didn't go down to the cellar immediately. I waited until exactly noon when the sun was highest, telling myself that darkness cannot defeat light. 12:30 p.m. I stood in front of door 19 once again. The crimson liquid puddle from yesterday had dried into a pitch-black patch, peeling like psoriasis on the stone floor. The foul smell still lingered, but fainter. I turned on the borescope display screen. The image was sharp. I took a deep breath, lay prone on the floor, keeping a safe distance, and pushed the camera probe towards the bottom of the door. As I said, door 19 fit tightly into the stone frame. But today, when I shone the light close to the bottom of the door, I saw the wood at the lower edge seem to have shrunk. There was a tiny gap, just enough to thread the 8mm diameter camera wire through. It was like the door was inviting me to look inside. My hand trembled as I pushed the probe through the gap. On the handheld screen, the image was pitch black for a second. Then the camera head LED automatically turned on. The thing that appeared on the screen made me frown. It was a stone brick floor, identical to the floor where I was lying. I controlled the lever to make the camera look up, scanning around the room. The signal started to interfere. Gray horizontal stripes ran down the screen, the buzzing sound of electromagnetic interference emitting from the device speaker. But I could still see clearly. It was a corridor. It looked exactly like the corridor I was lying in. The same type of bricks, the same dangling filament bulbs, but all were broken. The same stone walls. It was a distorted reflection of where I was. But there was one horrifying difference. I adjusted the camera to point at the ceiling of the room on the other side. The ceiling wasn't bare gray stone. It was covered densely with hundreds, thousands of handprints. Reddish-brown handprints, overlapping, packed tight. Some handprints were huge, but most were tiny, of the size of children's. And all those handprints pointed towards a single point, the gap in the door where I was feeding the camera in, as if thousands of people had stood on top of each other there, desperately clawing to escape. Escape towards me. Suddenly, the image on the screen jerked violently. Not because of interference. The camera wire in my hand went taut. Something inside had just grabbed the camera head. My reflexes were faster than thought. As soon as I felt the strong pull from the other end of the wire, I gritted my teeth and yanked the wire back with both hands. It wasn't like being caught on a rock or tree root. It was a real tug of war. The pull from the other side was very strong, decisive, and calculated. The plastic-coated cable cut into my palm, stinging painfully. The display screen on the floor danced wildly with patches of mixed gray and red. "Let go!" I screamed unconsciously, kicking hard against the stone wall for leverage. Snap. The resistance suddenly vanished. I fell backward, the camera wire whipping back and striking my face. I gasped for air, heart beating as if to burst my chest, hands gripping the retrieved wire end tightly. The camera head was gone. The metal part containing the lens and LED light had been severed. The break wasn't smooth like a plier cut, nor frayed like a tension break. It was twisted. The stainless steel was twisted and mangled like a chewing gum wrapper. I hurriedly looked down at the handheld device. It was still working, screen black due to signal loss, but the audio indicator light was still blinking green. It had recorded the whole event. With trembling hands, I pressed the play button. The scratching sound of the wire sliding on the stone floor, my ragged breathing. And then, right at the moment the image jerked violently, another sound rang out from the tiny speaker, clear and chilling amidst the silent cellar. Thank you for opening the way. I dropped the device to the floor. The blood in my body seemed to freeze. Not because of the content of the sentence, but because of that voice. It wasn't the raspy voice of a ghost or the hiss of a monster. It was my voice. It had the same pitch, the same intonation, even my characteristic enunciation, as if I was listening to a recording of myself, talking, from another dimension. Right then, a loud clack rang out from door 19. This time I saw it clearly. That pitch-black wooden door shook violently, and a hairline crack began to appear along the left edge. I don't remember how I ran out of the cellar and locked the steel door. My memory only returned when I was sitting on the kitchen floor, clutching the phone, my voice breaking as I screamed at the 911 operator. "There's an intruder! He's hiding in my wine cellar! He has a weapon!" 20 minutes later, a Napa County police car pulled up in the front yard. 2 police officers, one old and one young, entered with wary but professional expressions. Officer Miller, the older one, ordered me to stay back as they drew their guns and advanced towards the cellar door. "You say he's hiding in the last room?" Miller asked, hand on the steel door latch. "That's right," I nodded furiously, sweat soaking my forehead. "He's behind the black wooden door. Door number 19. They went down." I crept behind, keeping a safe distance. The police flashlight swept through the long tunnel-like corridor. The air was still cold, but the foul smell had disappeared completely. They checked every room. Empty. Finally, they stopped at the end of the corridor. Officer Miller lowered his gun, turning to look at me with a look of both confusion and pity. "Which door did you say, son?" I pushed forward, pointing into the darkness at the end of the hall. "Door 9. T." The words choked in my throat. There was nothing there. In the spot where door 19 should have been, there was only a rough stone wall, covered in dust and ancient cobwebs. The bricks looked like they had lain there undisturbed for a century. No sign of new wood, no gaps, no cracks. But I rushed forward, slamming my hand against the stone wall. Solid, cold, real. It was just here. I swear. I still have the broken camera. I fumbled in my pocket for the recording device. It was still there, but when I turned it on to let them hear the recording, there was only the crackle of white noise. That horrifying sentence had disappeared. Officer Miller sighed, holstering his gun. Listen, living alone in a place this big can cause stress. Plus, your grandfather's death. Maybe you should get some rest. They left after taking cursory notes. I thought I was paranoid. I thought I was crazy. I stood watching the police car lights fading behind the vineyard. Silence returned to cover the house. I turned to go up to the bedroom, trying to convince myself that maybe they were right. Maybe I really needed sedatives. But as I passed the kitchen door leading to the cellar, the door the police had forgotten to lock, I heard it. Cree. The sound of dry, unoiled hinges screeching echoed up from underground. I shuddered, slowly approached, and looked down the pitch-black stairs. At the end of the corridor, where 10 minutes ago was just a bare stone wall, door 19 had returned. And this time, it was cracked open a thumb's width. I didn't call the police back. They would only put me in a mental asylum, and that meant there would be no one left to guard this house. The clock struck 2:45 a.m. The witching hour grandfather warned about was approaching. The scratching sound in the cellar had changed. It wasn't stealthy anymore. Now, it was a violent, rapid sound, echoing up through the ventilation system, shaking my entire bedroom floor on the second story. Boom, boom, boom. Like a beast, throwing its whole body against the door. I opened grandfather's gun cabinet. The old Remington 870 lay there, cold and heavy. I loaded it with buckshot, hands still trembling, but my mind had become strangely cold. Extreme fear had transformed into a form of insane adrenaline. I needed to end this. I walked down the wine cellar stairs one step at a time. The noise down below was deafening. The foul smell had returned, more pungent than ever, thick as yellow-stained fog. When my flashlight shone to the end of the corridor, I saw door 19 dancing. The entire pitch-black wooden door frame was shuddering violently within the stone frame. Mortar dust fell like rain from the ceiling. The thumb-sized gap had now widened to the size of a hand. I raised the gun, finger on the trigger, moving closer. And that was when I saw a detail I had overlooked in previous times. A detail that made the blood in my body freeze. This door had hinges. They were 3 pitch-black iron hinges, huge as hands, located on this side, the corridor side where I was standing. According to construction principles, if hinges are on the outside, the door opens outwards. But the horrible thing was, these hinges had been welded shut, the rough, ugly welds piled on top of each other, showing someone's desperate effort to turn this door into an eternal wall. That room was not a wine cellar, it was a prison, and those welds were cracking. Cracks glowing orange from metal friction. Clang, clang, rang out every time a chunk of weld popped off under the terrible pressure from within. It wasn't trying to unlock to get out, it was smashing the obstacle to escape. Bang! A deafening explosion rang out. Not from my gun. The largest screw on the middle hinge, unable to withstand the pressure, shot out of the wall like a bullet, embedding itself into the oak wine barrel on the opposite side, causing red wine to spray out like blood. The door tilted sharply to one side. The gap was now wide enough for a person to fit through. I backed away, screaming a warning even though I knew no one could hear. Back off. I'll shoot. Answering me was a sudden silence. The door stopped shaking. Then, from the thick darkness of that gap, a hand reached out. It grabbed the edge of the black wooden door. It was a pale hand, chalk white like the belly of a dead fish, but its structure was completely wrong. The fingers were absurdly long, each having 4 or 5 knuckles, making it look more like a spider leg than a human hand. Jet black nails, long and curved, sank deep into the hard oak as if into soft mud. It found leverage, then started pulling. The sound of snapping wood. The door weighing hundreds of pounds began to bend. My flashlight beam shone straight into the gap. For a brief second, I saw the face of the owner of that hand. It had no eyes. Where eye sockets should have been was just smooth, flat skin. But the mouth. The mouth gaped wide to the ears, filled with tiny needle teeth arranged in spiral rows. And it was smiling, the smile of recognizing an acquaintance. Ah. It hissed, but it wasn't calling my grandfather. It was mimicking the sound. Then it changed pitch, distorting the voice until it sounded exactly like me when I screamed at the police. He's behind the black wooden door." It was mocking me. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot shook the entire cellar. The buckshot tore apart a chunk of wood where that hand was holding. That creature snatched its hand back with a piercing shriek, sounding like metal grinding on glass, but not out of pain. It was like anger. From within the door crack, dozens of other arms, smaller, blackened, charred, started reaching out, groping, trying to grab anything to push the door wide open. My next bullet only slowed them down for a split second. Those tiny, charred hands sprouted like mushrooms after rain, piling on top of each other, jamming the door gap, creating a disgusting living lever. The thick black oak door began to bend, the sound of cracking wood ringing out like breaking bones. In extreme panic, a scrawled line in red ink from grandfather's journal flashed in my mind. Fire is the only thing that cleanses. I threw the shotgun to the floor, turning and dashing towards door number 4, the vintage brandy storage. These were the strongest barrels with extremely high alcohol concentration that grandfather distilled separately. I grabbed 3 dust-covered brandy bottles, rushing back to the battlefield. That creature seemed to sense my intention. Its mouth full of needle teeth hissed a piercing sound, and those other arms started stretching out unnaturally towards me, trying to stop me. "Die!" I screamed, throwing the first bottle hard straight into the widening gap. Smash! The bottle shattered. Thick amber liquid splashed over the pale hands and the black wood. The second bottle, then the third flew in succession, turning the area in front of door 19 into a pungent pool of alcohol. I pulled the Zippo lighter from my jeans pocket, the only keepsake I kept from my dad. My hand shook so much I had to flick it 3 times to get a flame. Don't. The voice came from the door gap. This time it wasn't my voice anymore. It was my mother's voice, who died 10 years ago. Her voice was sweet, pleading, "Don't do it, son. Mom is in here. Mom is so cold." Tears welled up in my eyes, but the horror was greater than the pain. I threw the burning lighter into the pool of alcohol. Whoosh! Blue flame erupted violently, engulfing the door and the groping arms. The scream coming from inside door 19 was not a human or animal scream. It was the sound of metal being torn apart, the sound of rock being crushed, mixed with the crying of thousands of children rising at once. The charred hands writhed in the fire, trying to retreat into the darkness, but their flesh peeled off, melting like candle wax. The black wooden door began to curl, but not opening out, but shrinking from the heat, slowly closing shut like a wound being cauterized. The fire department arrived 30 minutes later due to the automatic fire alarm system activation. When they extinguished the fire in the cellar, all that remained was a pitch-black mess, soggy and smelling of acrid burning. They said I was lucky the fire didn't spread upstairs. They said a short circuit in the old lighting system was the cause. I just nodded, not saying a word. When they left, I went down to the cellar for the last time. Door 19 still stood there. It had been burned to charcoal, the shiny black surface now rough, cracked like alligator skin. But it didn't collapse. The fire seemed to have melted the hinges and the door frame, welding everything together into a unified mass with the stone wall. There were no gaps left. I thought I had won. I thought I had sealed it forever. But this morning, as I was packing up to leave this cursed house forever, I received a call from grandfather's lawyer. He said that grandfather had left a private letter to be opened only after I had lived here for fully 3 days. Inside the letter was just a single line. If you had to use fire, run immediately. Fire doesn't kill it. Fire only makes it hungrier. I dropped the letter. From beneath the floor, through the reinforced concrete and wood flooring, I heard a new sound. Not scratching, not banging on the door. It was chewing. Crunch, crunch. The sound of metal teeth gnawing away at the charred black layer of the cellar door. And its chewing speed was much faster than the scratching speed before. I am writing these lines in my car, 100 miles north of Napa Valley. I listed the house for sale at a dirt cheap price through an anonymous brokerage. If you are looking to buy a vineyard in California, and you see an old mansion with a large wine cellar with 18 storage compartments listed in the contract, please count the doors again before signing, because I'm afraid that the next time door 19 opens, it won't be in the cellar anymore. It could be any door in your house that you accidentally left unlocked at night.